In a small, picturesque town nestled between rolling hills and vibrant fields, there was a place that everyone talked about, the most famous restaurant in the area. The restaurant wasn't just known for its food, it was also notorious for its head chef. This man ran his kitchen like a military operation. Precision, discipline, and perfection were the only things that mattered to him. He had a reputation for being tough, some might even say impossible to please. His sharp comments could cut deeper than any knife, and his standards were so high that many cooks who worked under him didn't last more than a few weeks. The townspeople often whispered about him. They admired his talent but were intimidated by his personality. No one dared to cross him, not even the regular customers who came to savor the exquisite dishes he created. But despite his brilliance, there was something missing from his cooking. Oh, warmth, a connection, a sense of soul. It was as if every plate that left the kitchen was technically perfect, but lacked the heart that made food truly memorable. One sunny Saturday morning, the head chef decided to take a rare break from the chaos of the kitchen. He wandered through the local farmers' market, a lively spot filled with colorful stalls, fresh produce, and the smell of baked goods wafting through the air. As he strolled past baskets of ripe tomatoes, fragrant herbs, and jars of homemade pickles, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of inspiration. There was something raw and real about this place, something he hadn't felt in his own restaurant in years. That's when he noticed her. She was standing behind a modest stall, arranging jars of jam on a wooden shelf. Her setup was simple. No fancy decorations or flashy signs, just rows of glass jars filled with jewel-toned preserves. She wore an apron dusted with flour, and her hands moved with ease as she worked. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance. She looked like any other vendor at the market, someone you might pass by without giving a second thought. But there was something about the way she handled those jars, the care and attention she gave to each detail, that caught his eye. Curious, he approached her stall. "What do you sell here?" he asked, his tone brusque and direct, as if he were inspecting ingredients for his restaurant. She looked up, startled by his sudden presence. For a moment their eyes met, and he saw something in her gaze, calmness, wisdom, maybe even a hint of amusement. "Jams," she replied simply, gesturing to the jars around her. "All homemade." He picked up one of the jars, examining it closely. The label was handwritten, the lid sealed tightly. Inside, the preserve glistened like liquid gold. "And what makes your jam special?" he pressed, his voice dripping with skepticism. She smiled faintly, unfazed by his attitude. "It's not about being special," she said. "It's about making something honest. These jams are made with fruit I grow myself. No shortcuts, no artificial flavors, just patience and time." Her answer intrigued him, not because it was particularly clever or poetic, but because it was so different from the way he approached cooking. In his world, everything was about complexity, about pushing boundaries and creating dishes that would impress critics and dazzle diners. Honesty and simplicity weren't words he associated with fine dining. Feeling a mix of curiosity and doubt, he decided to test her. "If you're so confident in your skills, why don't you try making something more challenging, something that requires real technique?" She tilted her head, studying him carefully. "Like what?" "A dish," he said, crossing his arms. "Come to my restaurant tomorrow morning. I'll give you a recipe and we'll see if you can handle it." For a brief moment she hesitated. He expected her to back down, to make excuses or politely decline. After all, who would willingly walk into the lion's den? But instead, she nodded. "All right," she said calmly, as if agreeing to fetch water from a well rather than face off against one of the toughest chefs in the region. "I'll be there." As she watched him walk away, she couldn't help but chuckle softly to herself. If only he knew the truth. If only he realized that behind her quiet demeanor lay a lifetime of experience, a mastery of flavors, and memories of kitchens far grander than his own. But she wasn't going to tell him that. Not yet, anyway. For now, she would play along, curious to see where this little challenge might lead. The next day, she arrived at the restaurant, stepping into a world that was both familiar and foreign. The gleaming countertops, the rows of stainless steel, utensils, the hustle and bustle of the staff, it all brought back memories she had tried hard to forget. Memories of award ceremonies, late-night shifts, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. Memories of a life she had walked away from after losing the people who meant the most to her. But today wasn't about the past. Today was about showing up, doing her best, and seeing how this bold, arrogant chef reacted when he realized he had underestimated her. Little did she know, this simple act of accepting his challenge would set off a chain of events that neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, the woman arrived at the restaurant just as the sun began to peek over the horizon. She had dressed simply, wearing a plain shirt and jeans under her apron, carrying nothing but a small bag with a few personal items. As she stepped inside, the first thing that struck her was the contrast between this place and her quiet little stall at the farmer's market. The kitchen was alive with noise, pots clanging, knives slicing, voices shouting orders back and forth. It felt like stepping into another world entirely. The head chef was already there, standing in the middle of the chaos like the conductor of an orchestra. When he saw her walk in, his lips curled into a faint smirk. He gestured for her to follow, him leading her deeper into the heart of the kitchen. Every eye turned toward her as she passed, sizing her up. Some of the cooks exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from amusement to outright disbelief. Clearly, they didn't think much of her chances against the challenge ahead. "This is where you'll work," the chef said, stopping in front of a station cluttered with ingredients and tools. "Your task is to prepare one of my signature dishes, a pork pie wrapped in puff pastry. It's not easy, even for experienced chefs. Do you understand?" She nodded, unfazed by his tone or the skeptical stares around her. "I understand," she replied calmly, tying on an apron. The chef handed her a sheet of paper with the recipe written out in precise detail. As she scanned it, she noticed how intricate the steps were. Layers of flavor, textures, and techniques came together to create something that required skill, patience, and focus. To anyone else, it might have seemed overwhelming. But as she read through the instructions, a small smile played on her lips. This wasn't unfamiliar territory for her. It was a language she spoke fluently. The moment she picked up her knife, everything changed. The noisy kitchen faded into the background, replaced by the rhythm of her movements. Her hands moved with a grace that drew gasps from the other cooks. They watched in stunned silence as she chopped vegetables into perfect cubes, rolled dough, so thin you could almost see through it, and seasoned each component with a precision that bordered on artistry. Even the head chef, who prided himself on having seen it all, found himself leaning closer to observe her technique. At first, he tried to critique her. "Are you sure you're rolling that dough evenly?" he asked sharply, hovering behind her. Without looking up, she responded, "Yes." Her voice was steady, confident. He frowned, searching for flaws but finding none. Frustrated, he decided to push further. "What about the seasoning? Are you using enough salt?" Again, she answered without hesitation. "It's balanced. Too much salt would overpower the dish." His irritation grew. How could someone who looked so unremarkable be so self-assured? Determined to find fault, he lingered nearby, scrutinizing every move she made. Yet no matter how hard he looked, there was nothing to criticize. Everything she did was textbook perfect, and yet somehow more than that. There was a fluidity to her work, a natural ease that couldn't be taught or faked. Meanwhile, the rest of the kitchen staff began to whisper among themselves. At first, they had dismissed her as just another amateur trying her luck. But now, doubt crept in. Was it possible that she actually knew what she was doing? One of the younger cooks leaned over to a colleague. "Have you ever seen anyone handle a knife like that?" he murmured. "No," the other replied, shaking his head. "Not even close." As the hours ticked by, the tension in the room grew, thicker. The head chef paced back and forth, torn between admiration and frustration. Part of him wanted to acknowledge her talent, but another part refused to admit that someone so seemingly ordinary could outshine his own team. Still, he couldn't deny the evidence in front of him. Every step of the process, the caramelized, onions, the braised meat, the delicate layers of pastry, was executed flawlessly. By mid-morning, the aroma of her dish began to fill the air. Rich, savory scents mingled with hints of herbs and spices, making everyone's mouths water. Even the head chef, who rarely indulged in such distractions, found himself breathing deeply, unable to resist the tantalizing smell. Finally, it was time to assemble the final product. She worked quickly but carefully, layering the filling inside the pastry shell before sealing it shut. With practiced hands, she brushed the top with egg wash, ensuring it would bake to a golden brown. Then, she slid the pie into the oven and set the timer. As the minutes ticked down, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. Gone was the skepticism and mockery. In its place was anticipation. Everyone gathered around, waiting to see the result of her efforts. The head chef stood at the front of the group, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Inside, though, he was bracing himself for what might come next. When the timer dinged, she pulled the pie out of the oven. The pastry gleamed under the bright lights, perfectly puffed and golden. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Even the head chef had to admit it looked impressive, but looks alone weren't enough. The true test would be in the taste. She sliced into the pie, revealing the layers within. Juicy meat, fragrant herbs, and tender vegetables spilled out, releasing a burst of steam that carried the dish's aroma even further. Carefully, she plated a slice and handed it to the head chef. "Go ahead," she said softly, meeting his gaze. "Try it." For a moment, he hesitated. He had spent years building a reputation as someone who never backed down, never admitted defeat. But something in her eyes told him this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about respect for the craft, for the effort, for the person standing in front of him. Slowly, he picked up his fork and took a bite. The flavors exploded in his mouth, each element perfectly balanced and harmonious. The meat was tender, the pastry flaky, the seasoning spot on. It was, without question, one of the best things he'd ever tasted. And yet it wasn't just the technical mastery that impressed him. There was something else. A warmth, a depth, a story woven into every bite. It was food that didn't just feed the body but touched the soul. As he chewed, his mind raced. Who was this woman? How had she managed to create something so extraordinary? Questions swirled in his head, but for now, all he could do was stare at the plate in awe. Around him, the kitchen staff held their breath, waiting for his reaction. The buzz in the kitchen didn't die down after that first bite. The head chef's stunned silence said more than words ever could, and it sent ripples through the staff. Some of them were still trying to process what they'd just witnessed. How could someone who seemed so unassuming, someone who sold jam at a farmer's market, pull off something like this? Others began to whisper theories, their voices tinged with awe and disbelief. One of the sous chefs leaned over to a colleague, his voice barely above a murmur. "Did you see how she handled that dough? That wasn't beginner's luck. She's done this before, a lot." "Yeah," the other replied, glancing at her warily. "But where? And why is she here now?" Their questions hung in the air unanswered. Meanwhile, the woman herself remained unfazed by the growing attention. She moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, tidying up her station, wiping down counters, and stacking utensils neatly. Her focus never wavered, as if she hadn't noticed or didn't care that everyone was talking about her. The head chef, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. He watched her closely, studying her every move. There was something about her technique, a certain rhythm, a confidence that reminded him of chefs he'd worked with in the past. Chefs who had trained for years, honing their craft until it became second nature. It wasn't just skill, it was instinct. And instinct like that didn't come from selling jam at a market stall. Determined to get answers, he decided to push her further. If she really was as good as she seemed, then she should be able to handle even more challenges. Without warning, he strode over to her station and placed a small jar on the counter. Inside was a dark, glossy liquid, truffle-infused honey. "This," he announced loudly enough for the entire kitchen to hear, is your next twist. Incorporate this into the dish. Use it wisely or don't use it at all. The room fell silent. Truffle-infused honey was notoriously difficult to work with. Its flavor was bold and complex, capable of overpowering a dish if not used carefully. Even seasoned chefs hesitated to include it in their recipes, knowing how easily it could go wrong. By adding this unexpected ingredient, the head chef was testing her limits and perhaps hoping to catch her out. To everyone's surprise, she didn't flinch. Instead, she picked up the jar, turning it over in her hands as she examined it thoughtfully. After a moment, she nodded. "All right," she said simply, setting the jar down. Then, without hesitation, she got to work. As she began incorporating the honey into her dish, memories flooded back to her. She remembered the last time she'd cooked with truffles. Years ago, in a kitchen far grander than this one. Back then, she had been at the top of her game, celebrated for her creativity and precision. Awards lined the walls of her restaurant, and critics hailed her as a genius. But those days felt like another lifetime now. Since walking away from that world, she had tried to leave behind the pressure, the expectations, the constant need to prove herself. Yet here she was, standing in a bustling kitchen once again, doing exactly what she had vowed never to do. For a moment, she paused, her hand hovering over the pot. Was this a mistake? Should she have walked away when she had the chance? But then, she glanced around the room at the curious faces watching her, at the young cook scribbling notes, at the head chef pacing anxiously, and realized something important. This wasn't about fame or accolades anymore. It was about sharing her love for food, about creating something meaningful in the present moment. With that thought, she pushed her doubts aside and continued working. She drizzled the honey sparingly, letting its sweetness complement the savory richness of the pork pie. She added a touch to the glaze for the pastry, giving it a subtle sheen and depth of flavor. Every step was deliberate, every choice calculated. When she finished, she stepped back, surveying her work with a critical eye. Satisfied, she turned to the head chef. "It's ready," she said. He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Are you sure about this? Truffle-infused honey isn't exactly forgiving." She smiled faintly, a hint of mischief in her expression. "Taste it and find out." Reluctantly, he took a fork and cut into the pie. This time, the flavors were even more intricate, layered with new dimensions that danced across his palate. The honey added a luxurious sweetness that balanced the earthy truffle, tying the whole dish together in a way that felt almost magical. For a moment, he forgot where he was, lost in the complexity of the flavors. When he finally looked up, his expression was a mixture of admiration and frustration. "How did you know how to use that?" he demanded, his tone sharper than intended. "No one gets it right on the first try." Her smile softened, but her gaze remained steady. "Experience," she said simply, "and trust in the ingredients." Her answer only deepened the mystery surrounding her. The head chef opened his mouth to ask more, but before he could, one of the younger cooks spoke up nervously. "Chef, can I ask her something?" The head chef hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. The young cook stepped forward, his face flushed with excitement and apprehension. "Ma'am," he began, addressing her directly. "Your techniques, they remind me of someone I've seen online. Videos of a chef who ran a 3-star restaurant overseas. Are you her?" The question hung in the air, heavy with anticipation. Everyone froze, waiting for her response. For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes locked on the young cooks. Then with a sigh, she nodded. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "That was me. Once." Gasps erupted throughout the kitchen. The sous chefs exchanged wide-eyed glances, while others muttered excitedly under their breath. The head chef stared at her, his mind racing. All the pieces clicked into place, the flawless technique, the calm confidence, the way she carried herself. She wasn't just some amateur baker selling jam at a market. She was a legend in the culinary world. "Why didn't you say anything?" the head chef asked, his voice tinged with both anger and disbelief. "Why pretend to be someone you're not?" She met his gaze squarely, her expression unwavering. "Because I'm not that person anymore," she replied. I left that life behind for a reason. Fame, awards, recognition, they don't matter to me. What matters is the joy of cooking, the connection it brings. I came here to sell jam, not to relive the past. Her words struck a chord with everyone in the room. The head chef, in particular, felt a pang of guilt. He thought about all the times he'd pushed his team to chase perfection, to meet impossible standards. Had he become so obsessed with success that he'd forgotten the true purpose of food? Was he any different from the pressures she had walked away from? Before he could respond, the young cook who had uncovered her secret blurted out, "Can you teach us, please? We've never seen anyone cook like you before." The request caught her off guard. She hesitated, considering it. Teaching wasn't part of her plan. Not anymore. But as she looked around the room, at the eager faces and hopeful eyes, she felt a spark of something familiar, a desire to share her knowledge, to pass on what she had learned. Maybe this was her chance to reconnect with the passion she had, once cherished, without the weight of expectation dragging her down. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her tone softening. But no promises. With that, she turned back to her station, leaving the kitchen buzzing with excitement. The head chef watched her, torn between pride and humility. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. This simple challenge had turned into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The revelation about the woman's past spread through the kitchen like wildfire. By the time she finished cleaning her station, everyone knew, or thought they did. Whispers filled the air, blending with the clatter of pots and pans. Some of the staff couldn't stop staring at her, their eyes wide with admiration and disbelief. Others kept sneaking glances, trying to reconcile the humble jam seller they'd met just days ago with the legendary chef they'd seen in videos, online. The head chef, meanwhile, retreated to his office, his mind racing. He sat at his desk, staring blankly at the wall as he replayed everything that had happened. The flawless technique, the effortless skill, the way she handled even the most challenging ingredients, it all made sense now. But what troubled him most wasn't the fact that she had hidden her identity. It was the realization of how much he had misjudged her. He prided himself on being able to spot talent, yet here was someone who had slipped under his radar entirely. Worse still, he had treated her with condescension, dismissing her as ordinary before giving her a chance to prove herself. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. For years he had built his reputation on precision, discipline, and an unrelenting pursuit of perfection. He demanded excellence from his team, pushing them to their limits and beyond. But now he wondered if he had been too harsh, too focused on results rather than people. Was it possible that his methods had stifled creativity instead of nurturing it? The question gnawed at him, leaving him restless. Back in the kitchen, tension simmered beneath the surface. While some of the cooks were thrilled by the idea of learning from someone so accomplished, others felt threatened. A few of the senior chefs bristled at the thought of taking advice from someone who hadn't earned her place in the kitchen, at least not in their eyes. They muttered under their breath, questioning whether she truly deserved the praise she was receiving. One of the sous chefs, a tall man with graying hair and a no-nonsense attitude, approached her as she wiped down her counter. His tone was polite, but laced with skepticism. "So you're really that chef?" he asked, crossing his arms. "The one everyone talks about?" She paused, looking up at him. There was no defensiveness in her expression, only calm acknowledgement. "I used to be," she replied, "but that was a long time ago." He studied her for a moment, searching for signs of arrogance or ego. Finding none, he pressed further. "Why walk away from all of that? Most people would kill for the kind of success you had." Her smile was faint but genuine. "Success isn't everything," she said. "Sometimes it comes at a cost. I needed to step away, to find balance, to remember why I started cooking in the first place. Selling jam at the market gave me peace. It reminded me that food doesn't have to be complicated to be meaningful." Her words seemed to disarm him slightly, though he still looked unsure. "And now?" he asked. "What happens next?" She shrugged. "That's up to me, and maybe to all of you. If I decide to stay, It won't be about reclaiming anything I've lost. It'll be about sharing what I've learned. Her answer didn't satisfy everyone. As the day wore on, debates flared among the staff. Some argued that having her around could elevate the restaurant to new heights, while others worried that she might overshadow them or disrupt the existing dynamic. The head chef, sensing the growing divide, called a meeting to address the situation. Standing in front of his team, he cleared his throat, his usual stern demeanor softened by a hint of vulnerability. "Listen," he began, his voice steady but sincere. "What happened today? It's shaken things up, and I'll admit I didn't handle it well. I let my assumptions get in the way, and I underestimated someone who clearly has more talent than I gave her credit for." The room fell silent, the weight of his admission sinking in. No one expected him to apologize, not like this. Encouraged by their silence, he continued, "But we have an opportunity here. She's offered to teach us, to share her knowledge. That's something we can't afford to pass up. So I'm asking all of you, put aside your doubts, your pride, whatever's holding you back. Let's learn from her. Together we can make this restaurant better than it's ever been." His words struck a chord with many of the cooks, especially the younger ones who were eager to improve. Still, there were murmurs of dissent, reminders that change wasn't always easy. Sensing the lingering tension, the woman stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention. "I understand your concerns," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. "Change is scary, and I know I'm stepping into a space where I don't belong. But I'm not here to take over or compete with anyone. I'm here because I love cooking, and I believe in the power of food to bring people together. If you'll let me, I'd like to help you see that same magic in what you do every day." Her sincerity won over even the skeptics. Slowly, nods of agreement rippled through the room, followed by tentative smiles. For the first time since the challenge began, the atmosphere shifted, from suspicion to curiosity, from competition to collaboration. Over the next few days, she started working closely with the team. She moved through the kitchen with quiet authority, offering guidance without ever imposing her will. When a young cook struggled to perfect the texture of a sauce, she knelt beside him, showing him how to adjust the heat and stir gently to avoid splitting. When another hesitated to plate a dish, unsure of how to arrange the elements, she encouraged him to trust his instincts. "There's no right or wrong way," she told him. "Just follow what feels natural." Her approach was different from anything they'd experienced before. Where the head chef often barked orders and criticized mistakes, she listened patiently, offering constructive feedback and celebrating small victories. Under her mentorship, the kitchen transformed. Dishes became more thoughtful, flavors more nuanced, and presentations more creative. Even the head chef noticed the difference, marveling at how seamlessly she blended into the team despite her fame. For her, teaching was both rewarding and healing. It allowed her to reconnect with the passion that had once driven her, but without the pressure that had eventually pushed her away. She found joy in watching others grow, in seeing their confidence bloom as they mastered new techniques. And though she never sought recognition, the gratitude she received from the staff filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As the weeks passed, the restaurant began to attract attention, not just for its food, but for the camaraderie and energy that radiated from the kitchen. Customers noticed the difference, commenting on how the dishes seemed to tell a story, how each bite carried a piece of the chef's hearts. Word spread quickly, drawing crowds eager to experience the magic for themselves. Through it all, the woman remained humble, insisting that the credit belonged to the team. "It's not about me," she would say whenever someone praised her contributions. "It's about what we've created together." Her words resonated deeply, reminding everyone that greatness isn't achieved alone. It's shared, nurtured, and celebrated as a collective effort. By the time she decided it was time to return to her quiet life, the impact she'd made was undeniable. The restaurant thrived, the staff grew stronger, and the head chef became a better leader inspired by her example. Though she left behind no physical trace of her presence, the lessons she imparted lived on in every dish, every conversation, and every moment of connection forged in the kitchen. And as she walked away, carrying nothing but a bag of fresh produce and a heart full of memories, she knew she had finally found what she'd been searching for all along: peace, purpose, and the simple joy of sharing what she loved most. When the head chef finally took a bite of the pork pie, his face changed instantly. At first there was surprise. His eyebrows shot up and he froze mid-chew. Then came admiration, a look that no one in the kitchen had seen on him before. He put down his fork slowly, staring at the plate like it held some kind of magic. For a moment, no one said anything. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. The man who prided himself on being impossible to impress was clearly struggling with what he was feeling. He glanced at the woman standing across from him, the same woman he'd mocked just hours earlier for looking too ordinary to handle such a complicated dish. Now, she stood calmly, wiping her hands on a towel, watching him without saying a word. There was no smugness in her expression, no sign of gloating. She simply waited, letting the food speak for itself. But then something unexpected happened. One of the younger cooks in the kitchen, unable to hold back any longer, blurted out, "Chef, do you know who she really is?" Everyone turned to look at him, including the head chef. The young cook swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how much attention he'd drawn to himself. His voice shook as he continued. She's not just some random person. I've seen videos online. This is her style, her exact style. She used to run a famous restaurant overseas, a 3-star place." The head chef blinked, his mouth slightly open. He looked at the woman again, this time with suspicion mixed with curiosity. "Is this true?" he asked, his tone sharp but tinged with disbelief. For a second, she hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the towel she was holding. She hadn't wanted this moment to come. Not here. Not now. But she knew there was no point denying it anymore. With a deep breath, she nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "That's me." Or at least it was. The room erupted into whispers. Some of the staff exchanged wide-eyed glances, while others stared at her in awe. The head chef raised a hand to silence everyone, though his own mind was racing. He stepped closer to her, studying her face as if trying to see past the humble exterior. "Why didn't you say anything?" he demanded. "Why pretend to be someone you're not?" She sighed, lowering her gaze. "Because I'm not that person anymore," she replied. "I left all of that behind years ago. My life, it got too heavy, too full of expectations, too many people wanting things from me. I needed space to breathe, to figure out who I am when I'm not chasing perfection or living up to someone else's standards." She paused, then added quietly, "I came here to sell jam, not to prove anything to anyone." Her words hit the head chef like a punch to the gut. He thought about all the times he'd pushed his team to the brink, demanding nothing less than flawless execution. Was he any different from the pressures she'd described? Had he become the kind of leader who crushed spirits instead of inspiring them? He felt a pang of guilt but quickly pushed it aside. Instead, he focused on the bigger picture, the incredible talent standing right in front of him. "You can't walk away from this," he said firmly, surprising even himself. "What you've done today, it's extraordinary. You've reminded me why I fell in love with cooking in the first place, and my team. You've shown them what real skill looks like. Please, stay. Teach us. Help us grow." She shook her head. Immediately. "No, I can't go back to that world. It's not for me anymore." "Then don't think of it as going back," he insisted. "Think of it as sharing your gift. You don't have to take over the kitchen or deal with the spotlight. Just help us understand what we're missing. Show us how to make food that doesn't just feed people, but moves them." His words lingered in the air. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation to learn from her. Slowly, she began to consider it. Maybe this wasn't about returning to her old life. It was about finding a new way to connect with others through what she loved most. Cooking had always been her way of telling stories, of creating moments that brought people together. If she could do that here without the weight of fame, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she said. But only for a little while, and only if we keep things simple. No fancy titles, no grand plans, just teaching. Relief on the head chef's face was unmistakable. He extended his hand, and after a brief hesitation, she shook it. The rest of the staff erupted into applause, their respect for her shining through every clap and cheer. As the days went by, she started working with the team, guiding them with patience and care. She taught them techniques they'd never seen, before shared tips that seemed almost magical in their simplicity, and encouraged them to trust their instincts. Under her mentorship, the restaurant transformed. Dishes became more creative, flavors more vibrant, and customers couldn't stop raving about the changes. For the head chef, it was a turning point. He realized that leadership wasn't about barking orders or demanding perfection. It was about listening, learning, and growing alongside your team. He began to treat his staff differently, valuing their input and celebrating their successes. The once tense atmosphere in the kitchen gave way to laughter and collaboration, and for her it was a chance to rediscover her passion without losing herself in the process. She found joy in passing on her knowledge, in seeing the spark of excitement in someone's eyes when they mastered a new technique. Though she eventually returned to her quiet life, the impact she left behind was undeniable. The restaurant thrived, the staff grew confident, and the head chef became a better version of himself. All because one simple woman proved that greatness isn't about titles or awards. It's about heart, humility, and the power of sharing what you love. As the days turned into weeks, the kitchen transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The head chef, once known for his sharp tongue and unyielding standards, began to soften. He started paying closer attention to his team, not just their work, but them. He noticed when someone looked tired, when another seemed unsure of themselves, or when a cook lit up with pride after nailing a difficult technique. Slowly, he began to realize that leadership wasn't about fear. It was about trust, support, and encouragement. The woman's presence had sparked something in him. Watching her teach, guide, and inspire without ever raising her voice made him question everything he thought he knew about running a kitchen. For years, he'd believed that pressure was the only way to push people to greatness. But now, seeing how much his staff flourished under her patient mentorship, he understood that true excellence came from passion, not punishment. It was a lesson he vowed to carry forward. For the cooks, working alongside her became a masterclass in creativity and confidence. She didn't just show them how to perfect a sauce or plate a dish. She taught them how to think like chefs. Cooking isn't just about following recipes, she would say during quiet moments in the kitchen. It's about telling a story. Every ingredient has its own voice. Your job is to listen and bring those voices together in harmony. Her words resonated deeply, especially with the younger members of the team who often doubted their abilities. One evening, as the dinner rush wound down, a junior cook approached her hesitantly. His hands were trembling slightly, clutching a notebook filled with scribbled notes and sketches. I wanted to show you something, he stammered, holding out the book. I've been trying to come up with my own dish, but I'm not sure if it's any good. She took the notebook gently, flipping through the pages. Each page was crammed with ideas, flavor combinations, plating designs, even little doodles of ingredients. Her eyes softened as she looked at him. "This is wonderful," she said sincerely. "You're thinking outside the box, experimenting. That's exactly what cooking is all about." "But what if it doesn't turn out right?" he asked, his voice tinged with insecurity. "What if people don't like it?" "Then you try again," she replied with a smile. "Failure isn't the end, it's part of the process. Every mistake teaches you something new. Trust yourself, you'll get there." Her encouragement gave him the courage to take risks, to step out of his comfort zone. And when he finally presented his creation, a vibrant salad topped with crispy shallots and a tangy citrus dressing, the entire kitchen erupted into applause. Even the head chef nodded approvingly, clapping him on the back. "Good work," he said, his tone warm for once. "Keep going." Moments like these became more frequent as the weeks went by. The restaurant buzzed with energy, the kind that comes from people working together toward something bigger than themselves. Customers noticed the change too. Reviews poured in, praising not just the food but the atmosphere of warmth and care that seemed to radiate from every corner of the establishment. Word spread quickly, and soon reservations were booked weeks in advance. But despite the growing success, the woman never sought the spotlight. She continued to move quietly through the kitchen, offering guidance where needed and stepping back when others stepped up. Her humility inspired everyone around her, reminding them that greatness wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about making a difference, however small. Eventually, though, she knew it was time to leave. The market, stalls, the jars of jam, the simple life she cherished, they were calling her back. On her last day, the kitchen gathered around her, reluctant to let her go. Some of the cooks hugged her tightly, thanking her for believing in them. Others promised to keep practicing, to honor the lessons she'd taught them. The head chef, usually stoic, found himself struggling to find the right words. "I don't know how to thank you," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "You've changed us, all of us. We wouldn't be here without you." She smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You already have," she said softly. "The real work starts now. Keep listening to your team, keep pushing boundaries, and most importantly, keep cooking with heart. That's all anyone can ask for." With that, she packed up her things and walked out the door, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the restaurant and its people for years to come. In the months that followed, the changes she inspired continued to ripple through the kitchen. The head chef adopted her approach, focusing less on perfection and more on connection. He encouraged his team to experiment, to take ownership of their creations, and to celebrate each other's successes. The restaurant thrived, earning accolades not just for its food but for the sense of community it fostered. As for her, she returned to her quiet life, content in knowing she had made a difference. Selling jam at the farmer's market felt different now, not because of what she'd left behind, but because of what she'd rediscovered within herself. Cooking had always been her way of connecting with others, of sharing joy and love through something as simple as a meal. And while she might never return to the world of fine dining, she carried its lessons with her wherever she went. Years later, when customers at the restaurant asked about the secret to its success, the head chef would smile and tell them this: "It's not about the recipes or the techniques. It's about remembering why we cook in the first place. Food brings people together. It heals, it inspires, it reminds us of who we are. And sometimes it takes someone special to show us that truth." Though she was long gone, her influence lingered in every dish served, every conversation shared, and every moment of laughter echoing through the bustling kitchen. Because in the end, it wasn't about being extraordinary. It was about finding beauty in the ordinary and sharing it with the world.